Hi, my name is Ben Glauber, and this is my recording for the final project for Shaping Leaders. I'll just say this right off the bat. For whatever reason, my webcam is in the bottom of my computer, so at any point I'm just staring up at the ceiling. Just know that I'm forgetting about that and probably concentrating on an answer. So starting off, we can go into the career section and what lessons have you learned in launching, building, and activating your career search? So I felt like I had a really strong career search actually. I wasn't sure what to expect coming into school. I had never really networked in the past. I had found my job through a career fair and in undergrad and stuck with it the entirety of the way through. So I didn't really have a lot of recruiting experience. But the first lesson I've really come to appreciate is that it's important to really explore multiple different opportunities. I wanted to come in basically with a blank slate and really apply to as many jobs as I could, just not limit myself from the start, just so if I came down to having multiple opportunities, I'd have a chance to decide between options as opposed to be scrambling at the last minute to find a good choice for me. I think it's also like important to, while obviously I'm advocating for applying to a bunch of companies, it's putting different effort levels into them. So obviously your major companies and the top of your list are the ones you're going to be wanting to network a lot with, talk to multiple people, but it's exhausting to try and do that for 25, 30 companies. I think I ended up dropping over 40 or 50 applications all in all. Some of them were just resumes, but still, you don't want to be calling somebody at every one of those companies. So just being able to find a way to balance that and keep a good work-life balance was really important to me. I think it's also important when you're working with this career search is showing respect to your fellow students and helping them along the way. I noticed several times in networking circles, there were definitely people who would just try and dominate the conversation and didn't really allow some of their other classmates to voice as many questions or articulate their points. So I just didn't think that was good. I think some of it got better as recruiting went along, but just something I always want to be cognizant of is helping our fellow students and really building the best environment so that no one feels slighted and nobody feels like somebody's just dominating the situation. Lastly, I think in terms of activating and just in general is all about like maintaining relationships. So was fortunate enough to get multiple offers and I obviously had to go through the process of turning some of them down, but I think it's really important to maintain those relationships, continue to reach out to these people, just let them know that you appreciated their time and that leave those doors open for future potential career searches. So as I move forward and looking at this stop, start, and continue, there are definitely a few things that jump out for me. So one thing, and again, this almost sounds like a good problem to have, but I need to stop interviewing for as many of these companies. So I mentioned I dropped a bunch of applications and was fortunate enough to get a lot of interviews, but some of them I wasn't as interested in as some of my others, especially the more I found out about these companies. But still, even after I received my first offer, I still found I was interviewing for every job just because I felt I owed it to myself. But it was really draining. And frankly, I felt like I was sometimes wasting everyone's time because in the back of my mind, I knew I probably wasn't going to accept that offer if I got it. And it could go to one of my classmates. So I did get a little better towards the tail end of actually turning down final round interviews and things along those lines. But it's something I wish I'd started earlier and something I definitely think I'll be doing if I'm re-recruiting next year with the same level of success. One thing I want to start is using LinkedIn and off-campus tools. So I did my recruiting almost exclusively through the career website and the companies that came and recruited on campus, which was worked out for me. But I could definitely see a situation that if I was to re-recruit next year, I might have different luck and unfortunately not be able to actually receive an offer from this. I think LinkedIn and conferences are powerful ways to meet people that wouldn't normally come to UNC or we don't have as good of a relationship with. And it's definitely something I undervalued coming into school and would like to get better at and start doing in the future. And finally, in terms of the career goals, just I want to continue the same sort of networking and interview style I had. I feel like I was really composed and relaxed in some of these situations. And again, I mentioned this earlier, but didn't really try to dominate any conversations and just tried to connect to these people on a personal level. Make it seem that I'd like to have people be able to interview with, actually feel like they could work with me as opposed to just tolerate me in the office. I think that goes a long way and really helps companies help you fit in with their culture and things along those lines. Uh, Really, finally, this time, I forgot one more thing I want to start doing is additional case prep. So I definitely had a few jobs that I didn't go through the consulting prep and ended up interviewing either for consulting roles or internal strategy roles that had casing. And I felt like I was behind on that. So in the future, I'd like to get a little better about that. Cool. So moving on to the actual leadership section, reflecting on your growth as a leader this year, what have been the most significant things you've learned? So specifically identify two key things that you learned about yourself and one specific area that you need to focus on in the future. So starting with things that I learned about myself is the first, and I think it's a really important thing, is that a leadership style, uh, there's opportunity for it to be flexible there, and sometimes it actually should be and is important to have that flexibility. So I learned from working with my study teams and also various team projects or being legacy captain that you learn very quickly that different people respond to different sorts of motivators or appreciate different type of feedback. So not keeping that rigid universal, universal, not keeping that rigid, actually like not unchanging leadership style, but being able to adapt and talk to multiple different people in different ways to get the best out of them on every project, I think is really important. It's something I didn't necessarily do as much in my last job, but something I feel like I've improved upon here. And GlobeSmart and some of this SLCS stuff definitely helped, especially with reaching across different cultures. So I did find in some of my strengths finder that empathy has always been something I've been good with. So I think that has really helped me connect with a lot of my teammates and see what they want to do and why they might be approaching a problem a certain way. The second thing I really learned about myself was from being legacy captain. So I think it's one thing with leadership. I think sometimes it's important to be able to push people to get outside of their comfort zone. So this is something that I didn't necessarily do much again in my prior job, but an event that stands out in my mind for here is the Legacy Cup karaoke event. I really went all out to try and get as many of our legacy involved in that event, even people who aren't necessarily as outgoing or boisterous or anything along those lines. I really strive to get everyone to participate in some way, whether he was showing up with signs and sporting or actually getting involved and dancing on the actual stage. And I think we had tremendous success. The multiple people came up to me afterwards and continued to come up from the almost thanking me for pushing them to get involved and saying that it was their most fun night in business school so far. So I won't take credit for them having the time of their life or anything like that, but I'm glad I was able to motivate people. So again, pushing people to get outside of their comfort zone can have a really beneficial impact in business, but also just in day-to-day life. When I'm thinking about a specific area I need to focus on in the future, I keep coming back to one that I've really struggled with throughout my leadership or supervisory experience, and that's on personnel development. I have a real difficult time giving negative feedback. It's positive feedback's very easy for me, and project focused feedback being like great job on this analysis or you really did good job creating that Excel file for everyone. Like that's always been very simple for me, but actually finding ways to benefit employees or peers by telling them things they don't do as well and how I think they can improve them, that's something I continue to want to get better at. So I'm trying to do it this mod in particular with some of my group projects, especially within our consulting skills and frameworks class. I've had the opportunity to set goals for myself. So I really want to be able to constantly monitor my negative feedback and make sure that I am giving it, because I think constructive criticism is one of the best ways to really benefit your peers and future coworkers and supervisees. So lastly, on the global setting, what have you learned about communicating, managing, and leading effectively within diverse and global environments? So either through our EPIC forums or our Shaping Leaders class, and I also had the opportunity to do a global immersion to South Africa, I feel like I've really learned a lot, Southern Africa, not just South Africa. And a lot of it is based around things I wouldn't have necessarily thought about just doing business internationally. And that's the difference between different cultures. So I remember vividly a story we learned about in presentation skills where one of the presenters presented to a Japanese audience, thought there were zero questions, and just basically left the stage not realizing that their culture was so different that she had to actively look around, find people making direct eye contact, and then acknowledge them, and they would ask questions. So little things like that really stand out to me. Just the fact that you need to be cognizant of these differences in culture and differences in business practice before going on to these business trips or doing business internationally. You never want to risk offending or putting somebody off right from the start just because you were ignorant about one of their customs. It's easy to pick up as you go, but just doing your prior work and knowing that going in can be incredibly beneficial and impactful for long-term relationships. I think just having GlobeSmart as a resource going forward can be pretty beneficial as well. I didn't realize that. I think just even for my GIE, being able to quickly research the countries I was going for, seeing if there was anything I really need to know about going in, was really helpful for me. I was able to know some general things about South Africa from a business standpoint. So when we visited some of these, we went to a sock factory and we visited a bank and SAS in South Africa, and knowing some of those things going on in their country and things they expected from a former relationship was really helpful to know going in. So I think that was really advantageous for me. So that's it. As I move forward in business school, I hope to continue to develop a lot of these skills and further build upon them. And I'm looking forward to my summer and kind of putting all the stuff I've learned into good use.